So I'm going to give my opinion on dairy and what my stance is on it. I'm really pretty neutral on the topic or the substance. Makes it sound so bad, like it's a drug. And you have to realize that food is basically a drug. It doesn't matter whether it's dairy, wheat, protein. They all have drug-like effects. They are addicting in many ways. Typically, when you eat real food, food that is not processed, typically meat, vegetables, fruits, stuff like that, you're not going to eat a lot of it, and they're not really addicting. They're good, depending on how you prepare them, but in general, they're not addicting. However, foods that are processed, and dairy, for that matter, tends to be very addicting for some people. But really what it is not so much the dairy itself, it's really what's in the dairy, which is kind of what my topic of discussion is today. Uh, but before I get into some of the science that I kind of did some research on, one of the things that I've heard a lot about is dairy is very addicting, and just like gluten is or bread. And I come from a background, or one of my big core beliefs was the paleo diet. And whether you call it the paleo diet or you call it the vegetarian or veganism diet, it's all sort of the same diet, except obviously in vegan you can't eat protein. You can't eat any. You're not allowed to eat any animal-based products. Or vegetarianism, you just don't eat meat. But the idea is that you're eating as much real food as possible. Your food comes from real sources, sustainable sources, and that's kind of the whole purpose of it. Foods that are not processed. And that's sort of my view. I just don't call it the paleo diet. However, I do like the paleo diet concepts, and I'm a big Rob Wolf fan. I listen to the podcast. I listen to every single one. I'm a nerd when it comes to nutrition and exercise and fitness. And I remember when I first learned about the paleo solution and Rob Wolf, I went through all his podcasts and I became this kind of paleo Nazi. And then as the years gone on, I kind of come to my senses and begin to realize that this is not really practical for everybody, but it's definitely in the right direction. It's kind of like I used to be all about calories, but that's how I used to think in the past. And then I used to think, okay, now it's all about paleo. And then I've kind of come to a spot where it's kind of in between. And the big subject now is talking about dairy and whether or not dairy is good for you, or should you have dairy. I kind of like Matt Lalonde. If you know Matt Lalonde, he's been on the Rob Wolf podcast, Paleo Solution, and he's a scientist. He's got some really good. I like his stance on the whole topic because he's pretty unbiased about it. But he really believes that, it's not, as long as you tolerate it, it's fine. And that's kind of what I believe too. As long as you tolerate it, it's fine. I don't think, you should be having 80% of your calories come from dairy. I don't think 50% of your calories should come from dairy. I think a very relative small percentage should come from your dairy. And the other topic that comes up a lot or a lot of things I've heard on a lot of podcasts and stuff that I've read online and many discussion forums and whatnot, comes with the ideas of dairy being like a drug, or I should say sort of have addictive traits. And I'll read some stuff that I just kind of found here, and it's just kind of one of the things I looked at. Dairy from cows also contains exorphins. These exorphins are especially concentrated in cheese. Like the peptides found in wheat gluten, those that are found in dairy are able to bind to morphine receptors in the brain. The exorphins that are found in dairy are called casomorphins. Anyways, the idea is that essentially there's something in dairy, exomorphins or casomorphins, I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to be 100% expert of it. I'm just going off kind of what I've learned and heard and also experienced, because a lot of the stuff, even if you hear from someone who's super smart, like a scientist or someone like Rob Wolf, Matt Lalonde or whatnot, you still have to consider your own personal experience with it. And my personal experience is I don't really tolerate milk very well. And most dairy products give me a ton of gas. So I'm basically very dangerous to be around when I actually have a lot of ice cream and whatnot. So I generally try to stay away from it. And there's probably a good chance that if I'm making weird sounds, that it probably doesn't work well with my body. And it's probably a good idea not to have a whole lot of that, or at least not have it on a regular basis. Another thing to remember, or another thing to consider with my own personal fitness and all my own nutrition, I could almost eat an unlimited amount of cheese. An unlimited amount of ice cream. Ice cream's a little different, but cheese I can eat a lot. Not a lot of people can eat a lot of cheese. I can eat a shitload of cheese. I know my own personal problems with food and my own issues, so I already know what to stay away from. If I have one slice of cheese, I'll have 2 slices of cheese. It's not nearly as addicting, but however, it's still very calorie dense. It's very easy to go over my calories if I'm not paying attention. The other thing is that ice cream is a little different because there's sugar, and then you add there's fat, and you got the dairy in there. It kind of creates this really very palatable food that makes you want to overeat it. So is it the dairy, or is it the sugar, or is it kind of the processing of all together that makes it addicting and makes you eat too much of it? It's probably a little bit of everything. And as long as your body tolerates it well and you look fine, you maintain a good body fat, you overall feel pretty good when you eat it, I see no reason why you should have it. Like, I find that if I eat ice cream, I do fairly okay, as long as I don't have it like every single night. And that's kind of what it comes down to. It's just kind of knowing what works with your body, because it's really individualized. I think people say, ice cream is so bad for you, or dairy can be bad for you depending on what circles you have. It all comes down to personal preference and personal, personal, how you respond to food. Tolerances, that's what the word I was looking for. Personal tolerances when it comes to food. So when it comes to your food, pick the foods that you can tolerate well. If you feel bloated, or you feel gassy, or you kind of don't have really low energies, you get insulin spikes and get really sleepy after you eat it, there's probably a good chance that there's something in the food or something about the food that's bothering you. Whether you believe in the whole gluten thing, if it is a total, fad, or maybe it's overblown. I do think it's a little bit overblown out of proportion. However, there's something to the whole gluten story, and it's really not, unless you're a nerd, super nerd. I'm not even that much of a nerd to dig through all the science. I'm not even like that. I just hear from other experts, and then I kind of use my own personal experience and form a conclusion for myself. And as far as how I coach clients, generally, people who need to lose weight shouldn't be eating a whole ton of bread anyway. If you have a slice of bread, it's not going to kill you. It's probably going to be okay. If you have some milk, it's probably not going to kill you. You're going to be okay. It's really more about how much you consume and how physically active you are. One thing I'll kind of end with, and I'll close here with, is whey protein. I don't tolerate a lot of whey protein. I usually have to have a really high quality protein so that I don't have problems with my stomach. And the reality is, for me and my schedule, sometimes it's hard to get enough protein in my diet, and a lot of people do protein shakes for that reason. If it were possible to get all your protein sources from food, and you have the time and ability to do that, or on the days that you are able to do that, you should do that, because that's ideally the best place to go. The only reason why you'll do protein shakes is because you need something quick, you're on the go, and you are just having some trouble just getting what you need into your diet based on your programming goals. And again, it's all individual. I don't really stick to any whole lot of protein shakes. I don't use them as meal replacements. I guess I kind of do. I use them more as post-workout. If I do have a protein shake, it's usually post-workout. And the reason why I do that is because I typically work out twice a day, or I have a very long workout session. So what ends up happening is I need to refuel for the following session, depending on what I'm doing. But if I have food available, I'll eat food. If I have a client coming up in the next 15 minutes, for example, or whatnot, I'm going to get a protein shake instead. So it just all comes down to kind of personal preference and how your food body tolerates it. I just try to not have a protein shake every day, because I do know that starts to give me some issues with congestion a little bit. Makes me kind of mucusy. And everyone's a little different. So again, pick your choice, pick your poison. I don't think it's that big of a deal. But again, don't make 50% of your calories come from dairy. There's a good chance it's not a good idea. So anyways, again, do whatever you feel is going to work for you, and there is no perfect answer. It's all about you and what works for you.